Good evening, everyone. It's lovely to see you here. So my talk this evening is about the Broighter gold hoard, a high-profile legal wrangle between Sir Edward Carson and a mythological sea god. So first of all, what are we talking about? Well, we are talking about a wonderful collection of gold artifacts. There they are, a torque, a boat with oars, 2 bracelets and 2 necklaces. And they were found in a field outside Limavady in 1896. Where can you see them today? You can see them in the National Gallery of Ireland in Dublin. And anytime I'm in Dublin, and if I've got a few free hours, I love to just go and look around that museum. And this is one of the things that I love to go and see. So where was it found? Well, it was found in the townland of Broighter, which is near the mouth of the River Roe, where the River Roe, here's the River Roe here, flowing into the sea there, Lough Foyle. Now this area of land, I'll just tell you, is a raised beach. It's very, very fertile land. Some of the most fertile land in all of Ireland and indeed all of the British Isles. Very, very fertile. It's a raised beach. The land has been gradually rising since the last ice age. And so this area of land, sometimes known as the Myro levels, is rich in alluvial soils. Okay, very, 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 very fertile. So it was here one evening while ploughing that a man called Tom Nicholl discovered this wonderful hoard. And I'm going to read a little bit about it. These are the words of Tom Nicholl's son. One February evening in 1896, my father, Tom Nicholl, and another ploughman by the name of James Morrow were ploughing in a field at Broighter near Limavady. In order to turn over an increased depth of soil, the 2 ploughs followed each other along the same furrow. My father on the second plough struck a hard object like a stone at a place where the field had formerly been divided into 2 by a ditch. When he investigated, he saw a small metal dish wedged in the sock of his plough and a number of other ornaments encased in a large clod of sticky clay. Sensing that it might be something of value, the 2 men took their find back to the farmyard of their employer, Joseph Gibson. There the clay was washed away in an open sink by a maid called Maggie McLaughlin. Now she later went on to marry Tom, and the speaker here is her son. To everyone's surprise, several gold objects were revealed, including a richly ornamented collar, a little boat with oars, a bowl, 2 bracelets and 2 necklaces. My father handed them over to his employer, who in turn sold them for £200 to a jeweller in Derry. They were then bought by Robert Day, an active collector from Cork. After he had the boat repaired in Dublin, where it had been slightly damaged by the plough, he sold the collection to the British Museum for £600. So Robert Day, he tripled his money, and thus this hoard of gold went to the British Museum in London. So today, if you're driving between just outside Limavady, between Limavady and Ballykelly, there is the Broighter Road, and the townland is called Tullyho. There you are, the Broighter Road. Okay, now this is the gentleman, Tom Nicholl, who discovered the hoard. And he was a very honest, decent man. He never ever made a penny out of any of it. And yet he had quite a lot of stress as a result of the court case that was later to take place. Today, if you go to this area, this is the actual farmhouse today as it is. This is the field where the Broighter gold was found. You can see it's quite flat. very fertile alluvial soils mixed with a wee bit of boulder clay makes them very, very, very fertile. Now, it ended up, as I say, in the British Museum in London. But there were those who thought it should be back in Ireland. Now, of course, this is before partition. Ireland is all British at that time, but there were still those who felt it should be back in Ireland. And this is where the fun begins. The Royal Irish Academy felt that they should have it and it should be back in Dublin. And they hired the best QC of the day, Sir Edward Carson. Okay, so here is the two sides, the two arguments. They're very, very complicated, the treasure trove arguments, but a Mr. Justice Farwell was the judge who presided over 4 days of hearings. Now, on the left-hand side, we have the Royal Irish Academy, represented by Sir Edward Carson. They wanted to get the hoard back to Dublin, back to Ireland. Now, basically, if something is concealed or deposited with the intention of recovery at a later date, the Crown can claim it on behalf of the unknown next of kin as treasure trove. Okay, so this was the argument that Sir Edward Carson was putting forward. And there were various experts that he called upon. And he called upon Tom Nicol he cross-examined him. He asked him what state he found it in. Now, apparently, according to Tom's son, no, sorry, this is his grandson. My grandson, who was 28 at the time, was brought to London as one of the principal witnesses for the Academy. However, his North Derry accent proved too much for the court officials. I believe another witness, Professor Myers, an Ulster-born lecturer in classical archaeology at Oxford, had to act as his interpreter. So he would have been asked, how did you find it? Oh, he would have said, it's all covered in glaur, it was all covered in clabber. And that would have been translated, your lordship, it means it was all covered in mud. So it must have been quite an entertaining court case. But on the other side of the argument is the British Museum on the right-hand side here. They were putting forward the argument that, in fact, it was a votive offering to the Celtic sea god of Lough Foyle, Manannán mac Lir. That it, and if something is lost or abandoned, basically it's finders keepers. So that was their argument, that it had been lost, it had been abandoned. It was quite possibly an Iron Age or late Bronze Age offering to Manannán mac Lir. Now that sounds a little bit high-fetched, but that's what they were arguing. And after 4 days, Mr. Justice Farwell, he threw the British Museum's idea out and he held with Sir Edward Carson's argument and the Royal Irish Academy that it had been concealed or deposited for future point in time, and that the Crown therefore should claim it as treasure trove. And so it was awarded to the Royal Irish Academy. And that's how it comes to be in the National Museum of Ireland in Dublin. Now, let's look at the next frame. If any of you ever go up to Gortmore viewing point, that is the statue of Manannán mac Lir, the Celtic sea god. And he is looking out over his dominion. He's looking out over Lough Foyle there and McGilligan Point, which is a huge cuspate foreland pointing out into Lough Foyle there. Okay. Further along that road, you can go up to the top of Benevena. And from the top of Benevena, you can look out over towards you see the yellow rapeseed crop there. and that is the Broighter area. That's where the gold hoard was found. There's another view again of McGilligan Point looking out over Lough Foyle. And again, okay, that's a better one there. This is, we're standing at the top of Benevena here. We're looking at the River Row there going into Lough Foyle, sometimes known as the Myrow levels. Very, very, very fertile land. And of course, nowadays, the farm that where the hoard was found is now famous for its rapeseed crop. So here we have Sir Edward Carson, who won the day. Of course, you may recall that Sir Edward Carson, his statue is at Stormont. He was very much a unionist and was participating in the negotiations that resulted in Ireland being partitioned. He was a leading barrister of his day, and he was also, incidentally, the barrister that prosecuted Oscar Wilde. So if we go back again and look at present day farm, today that same farm grows rapeseed, and they have a business that produces the oil from it. And guess what they call it? They call it Broighter Gold. And that's how you can buy it there today. Some of you have maybe seen that. So that brings it right up to the beginning. So that is the story of, that's what the crop looks like close up. So that is the story of the Broighter Gold Hoard. So was Sir Edward Carson correct in his arguments? Modern day archaeologists would reckon that, in fact, although he won the case, he was actually wrong. There's a fair amount of evidence to suggest that, in fact, it was a votive offering to the Celtic sea god, Manon MacLear. And the interesting thing about it is, while Sir Edward Carson won the day and got the hoard back to Dublin, the Royal Irish Academy, and many people would say, well, that's probably where it should be, in the National Museum of Ireland. The interesting thing about it is that a few years later, well, I think the court case was in 1903 or 4. So roll on another 16 or 17 years and we have partition, we have Ireland divided, 6 counties British, 26 counties the Irish Free State. And if in fact the British Museum had won that court case and had held on to it, it would have been, that hoard would have been in British hands, and therefore the Ulster Museum in Belfast would therefore have had a very good claim to have it on display there. So it's interesting how history has panned out. Now, a few years ago, I think it was 2016, the hoard was on loan to Limavady Museum for a few months, and then it went back again to Dublin. But anyway, it's an interesting wee story. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll take any questions if you have any. Can you unmute us all now, Keith?
I can't think of any.
I didn't know about this treasure trove until you had been describing it. Some gorgeous looking artifacts there.
Yes, yes. If you're ever in Dublin, go into the National Museum. You know, the one, it's beside the Leinster House, beside the Dáil. Admission's free, and it's in a beautiful glass case. And the kind of tragedy of it all is some of those little oars, they're not all there. Some of them were actually the wash down the sink. Let's see.
Gosh almighty.
I know, yes, isn't it awful? Yeah, yeah. Yeah. So this is Tom Nichols' son speaking again. Remember his mother, she was the maid that cleaned it all and who later married Tom. My mother once told me that it was quite possible that some of the smaller objects could have been washed down the drain, for she did not know that they were made of gold and she took no great care in cleaning them. Now, Robert Day, he was the guy that bought it for £200. No, yeah, and sold it for 600. And he just when he heard that and discovered that one of the seats of the boat were missing, he travelled all the way back to Broighter to see if he could find them. But even though he had all the drains lifted, the missing pieces eluded him. It is said that Robert Day had no chance of finding the seat, added Jack Nicholl, a grandson of Tom. A few days after the find, James Morrow was the other ploughman, was walking over the field where the objects were discovered, and to his surprise found the missing portion of the boat. By that time, the ornaments had all been sold, so he gave it to his sister, who sold it to a jeweller in Limavady. So there we have it. But it's probably Iron Age, and at that time in Ireland, the metal workers in Ireland were second to none. I mean, it's absolutely exquisite. This photograph doesn't really show it to any great effect. You really need to go and see it in reality to marvel at it. Solid gold. The workmanship is absolutely amazing. The Celtic carvings on this torque are amazing. And at that time, as I say, metalworking in Ireland was very, very significant. We led Europe really in it. You know, it was the heart of Celtic craftsmanship. So it's really something special. You couldn't even put a price on it, really. So there you are. That's our treasure, found outside Limavady in 1896.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I heard about this for the first time, I think, a few weeks ago, because it came up in the most unlikely sort of sources. It was the BBC broadcasts to mark the 100th anniversary of Northern Ireland, and they talked about it because they talked about whether Sir Edward Carson liaised. They were both. He was working in concert, or maybe he wasn't, with the leading nationalist leaders, and then they sort of both denied that they would have worked on the project of bringing it back to Ireland together. So that's how I heard about it a few weeks ago. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting to think what might have been. I mean, I have no doubt that although his argument probably was not correct, he did win the day and he did get it back to Dublin, and the Royal Irish Academy then handed it over to the National Museum of Ireland. And I think it's probably the right place for it. However, had the British Academy held on to it in London, after partition and all the rest of it, we probably could have got it back then to the Ulster Museum in Belfast, you know?
Yeah.
But having said that, I think it's well placed where it is. You know, but it's one of those interesting what might have been stories, you know?
Yeah, I'm a little bit reminded of, you know, people, when you have historical artifacts like that, and then there's sort of, you know, arguments over whether, you know, ownership because of historical things. You know, there's plenty of examples like the Elgin Marble, and which is the Africa Star in St Edward's Crown or something like that. I think that, you know, in India's got, you know, a claim on it. So yeah, there's sort of quite a few, isn't there, you know, I suppose.
But I think it's nice that on that farm now they grow this rapeseed and they produce the oil, and they called it Broighter gold. I don't know whether you've seen it in any of the shops, have you?
No.
Certainly in Coleraine here, where I live,
All right.
there's a shop I can get it in, and also there's a butcher's in Portstewart.
Oh, wow.
This particular one I like is the garlic infused, but they do rosemary infused, and it's lovely. It's a nice alternative to say olive oil, you know. So it's called Broighter Gold, and it's a nice kind of continuation of the story into the present day, really. Certainly the fields look lovely. Just a couple of weeks ago, taking those photographs. I mean, the fields were, I mean, absolutely beautiful crop. It's really, really lovely crop. That's Ben Evana there in the distance. So it's a lovely part of the world, lovely part of County Londonderry, and not a lot of people know about it. It's something that isn't really on the tourist map, because often the tourist coaches, when they're going around Ireland, they'll be at Giant's Causeway, and then they'll be heading over to City of Derry and Donegal, and they often go the main road, and they miss little hidden gems of places like this, you know. But Tom Nicol himself never made a penny out of it. I think he was given his expenses, and he was his employer bought him a new suit for going over to London for the court case. But other than that, he didn't make anything out of it. And do you know one of the sadnesses? He died. I think it was 1964. He died, and he never ever got the chance to see it in the museum in Dublin, which I think is a bit sad. Considering that he had found it, you know, in a very muddy state. So there you go. That's my little talk for this evening. Hope you enjoyed it.
There's I just have to agree with you wholeheartedly. It would have been a very interesting situation indeed, Jennifer, if it was the other way around and it was in the Ulster Museum, because you might not be aware there's an awful lot of treasures from all over the world that are held in the British Museum, and there's a lot of European museums that hold on to treasures from Africa as well, and Africa is in great disputes to get those back. So you know, if it was to be held in the Ulster Museum and then say somewhere along the lines transferred to a mainland British museum, who knows how long we wouldn't be able to get them back for.
Yes. And actually, I think it was 2016. It was on loan from the Museum of Dublin up to Limavady, so it actually came home for a while. But I don't know that we have the security. I mean, maybe that's where it should be. Maybe it should be in a museum in Limavady or a museum in Derry, City of Derry, or somewhere like that. But I don't know whether we would have the security or the people with the knowledge to look after it properly as they would have in Dublin. Not sure about that.
That's the most difficult part of keeping treasures, is making sure that they're kept safe and they're kept where they are.
Yes, and that that people know about them and can the provenance of them is retained. Now there was a programme, I don't know whether any of you saw it. It was an RTE, but it was also shown on BBC4. It was called Hidden Treasures of Ireland, and this was mentioned. And do you know she's a well-known historian, archaeologist girl. She came over, and I think they have perhaps a copy of it in the Ulster Museum. It's not the original. The original is in Dublin, but she was in the Ulster Museum talking about it as well to someone, and I think there's possibly a copy of it there. But the original is absolutely amazing, and anytime any of you are in Dublin, I would very much recommend that you go and have a look at it. It's absolutely priceless. And of course, Irish history started here in the north, you know, with the Mount Sandal site, oldest site of human habitation in Ireland. We have so much here in the north that we don't use to our benefit, really, in terms of tourism.
Yeah.
There's one more wee question. In your presentation, there was a statue of a man standing on the bow of a boat. What do you call it? Did that happen to be the same statue that was defaced. They tried to chop off the statue at the feet, and then they.
Yeah.
That was the same statue? I thought so.
Yeah, that's Manon MacLear, Celtic sea god, okay? Now, obviously, we're going back pre-Christian times, pagan god, right? So we're talking about maybe late Bronze Age into the Iron Age. The people were Celtic people at that time. They had different gods that they worshipped, and they were very much into nature and so on. And then afterwards, Christianity comes, and these kind of notions are kind of wiped out. But a few years ago, yes, he was toppled and defaced. Well, I don't know that he was defaced as such. They just kind of removed him from that. And actually, there's a very steep drop and at Gortmore viewing point, and they just threw him over the edge, and he was found in trees and woodland, and then they resurrected him again. Now, I think at the time, I'm not sure who the Vandals were, but actually, I think they blamed some fundamental Christian group.
Yeah.
Aye, because that's the graffiti that they found on it.
Yes, yeah, that's right. So how ignorant can you be, but anyway, he's back again in all his glory there. And when you're actually at that point, as I say, it's Gortmore viewing point, the view right out over McGilligan Point, which is a huge cuspate foreland. It's formed by sediment coming down from Lough Foyle and sand coming in from the sea. And the point actually changes from time to time. There's constant, sometimes there's erosion, sometimes there's deposition, and it's constantly changing where the point actually is. And there's a Martello Tower out there, and there's the famous McGilligan Prison. It's a huge area of land and very, very fertile and very productive farmland. So that's Manon MacLear looking over Lough Foyle. He was the sea god of Lough Foyle. And I think the archaeologists would say that, in fact, it probably was a votive offering to him. So there you go. And at the time, if we go back to when it would have been put into Lough Foyle, that area was submerged by water. Okay. So the notion that, in fact, it had been buried in the soil probably would not be true. So, as I say, Sir Edward Carson, he won the case, but his argument actually wasn't right. So there you go. So any ideas, or anybody like to volunteer a little talk for next time?
I have a question, Jennifer.
Yes.
Go back to the picture of the car park.
Yes. Okay.
Can you find the car park?
Let's see. Yep, that it?
Yeah.
That's a Gortmore viewing point, yeah.
Isn't it near there that they did the first triangulation point when they were measuring Ireland?
Oh, yes, I think you're right.
Yeah,
Yes, you are right. You are right. Yes, when they were making the first ordnance survey maps of Ireland, that's correct. 0000 is McGilligan. That's right. Yeah, that's true. Had you heard of this before, Joyce?
Oh yes.
Yeah.
As well.
Alice Roberts. That's the name of the historian.
Yeah.
Alice Roberts came over and did an in-depth programme, and it was one of a number of Irish treasures that they featured in the programme. If you ever get a chance to see that, I don't know whether it's in BBC iPlayer, but it was in BBC 4. It's been shown a few times, and I think it was in RTE as well, and it's called Ireland's Hidden Treasures. Really fascinating programme to watch.
They had to create a stone plinth in order to get the first map coordinates, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I've seen those before. Very, very old bits of work they are. Very, very old.